fantasy
So
football.
there has never been more obvious sell.
There's a huge edge to be gained by looking into things like this.
With the hype, it's only going one way. He's still too cheap.
How can you not love fantasy football?
Week 4 is here already. That is right. We are back live. Hopefully your fantasy season has started off well. But don't worry if it hasn't. We're going to get you prepared for this week's action, breaking down every single matchup on this week's slate. Timestamps are at the bottom, so if you're not joining us live, you can jump ahead to a specific matchup. But more importantly, if you are joining us live, welcome. We'll be answering all of your questions at the end of each game as we go. So get those comments in below. Tom, we're going to kick things off with a playoff grudge match from last year. The Philadelphia Eagles at Tampa Bay. And obviously Tampa Bay came out victorious last year. Very different team in Philadelphia. Looking like definitely no Devonta Smith, potentially no AJ Brown, or are you thinking that he could potentially squeeze in as we get to Sunday?
Well, we haven't heard any reports yet that suggest he is going to make it out there, and it's going to be quite a disappointment if we don't have Devonta Smith because of that horrendous hit from the Saints. I mean, let's call it what it was. That was an absolute dirty hit, one which you'd expect to see from the Saints like 5, 6, 7, 8 years ago rather than right now. But yeah, Devonta Smith most likely out. AJ Brown sounds like he'll potentially be out. The way the insiders talked about it last weekend suggested there wouldn't be much chance. Which, when you add all that together, it definitely dings what we can expect from Jalen Hurts, who so far this year, it's just felt like there's another level of Jalen Hurts that we're not quite getting yet. He's 7th in completions over expected, but he's not looking as fast as he has done in previous years. I think when he's rushing, it feels like there's a little bit more still to be got, even though he's got the 4th most quarterback rush yards per game. I guess that where the chalk is going to end up being in DFS is Dallas Goedert, who comes off a career high 170 yards on 10 catches. And this wasn't all after Devonta Smith went out. Like, they were getting the ball to Goedert throughout. And then, of course, you can probably bank on Saquon Barkley seeing a really high amount of touches again. Leads all running backs with 24.3 touches per game. And Tampa Bay, they allow the 7th most fantasy points to both quarterback and the running back position. This isn't the Bucs, who were incredible at stopping the run like they've been at certain points over the last few years. This Bucs defense, you can get at them. But I think the Bucs are going to be able to get at Tampa Bay because when you look at what the Eagles do well on defense, it's kind of quite perplexing. At the minute, they're seeing deep passes at the second highest rate, 15.7%. They're not really stopping the pass at all. They're not necessarily stopping the run. I think the biggest question here is how does this backfield shake out for Tampa Bay? Because over the course of this season, Bucky Irving ranks 2nd among running backs with 25 plus attempts at 6.2 yards per carry, and Rachaad White ranks 33rd with 2.1 yards per carry. Every week Bucky Irving's been out there, he's seen his rush share grow from 37% in week 1 up to 56% in week 3. He hasn't allowed a single quarterback hit, pressure, or sack on any of his pass pro reps. But then he misses practice today, but he tells reporters that he's going to play. So I think you can have confidence in most of the guys who we know are going to play in this. But any of the guys who've got the question marks about injury, I don't want any part of them. When it comes to the Tampa Bay running back room, though, that's the big headache. Is there a particular way you're leaning there, Rich?
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm a big Bucky Irving fan. I was throughout the whole kind of rookie hype process. I really liked him as a prospect. But I think that the hype is getting a little bit out of control. Like, yes, he's, you look at the numbers, he's had far better efficiency and things like that. The issue rushing the ball for Tampa isn't, I don't think, Rachaad White versus Bucky Irving. I think it's the offensive line. But Rachaad White is still fantastic in the passing game. And that's where the value is. That's where those high value touches are going to come. Yeah, Bucky Irving might eat into the running back rush share, but I don't think it's going to be anything more than maybe 50%. And do we want a guy that's maybe going to get 8 to 10 rushes a game and doesn't really contribute in the passing game? I think at the moment, we're both anti Rachaad White and big kind of Bucky Irving guys, but I don't think Bucky Irving's taken over this backfield. And I think the way people are talking over the past week is you'd think Bucky Irving's the second coming and Rachaad White is, me out there. So yeah, I think we need to cool the jets slightly. On the Saquon Barkley thing, obviously he's been phenomenal, RB1 2 out of 3 weeks so far. Do you think that can continue against a Tampa Bay team, which, look, the defense isn't what it used to be, but we know that Todd Bowles is going to blitz a lot. I still think Jalen Hurts has got serious issues processing and finding his answer against the blitz. Do you think that could be a good thing or bad thing for Saquon Barkley?
So Ian Hartitz of Fantasy Life tweeted out today how Saquon Barkley's first 3 games with the Eagles stack up pretty well against DeAndre Swift's last year. They were both around 300 yards. They were both like DeAndre Swift had 6.8 yards per carry over the first 3 last year, and Saquon Barkley's had 5.6. Now, I'm not saying that I think that Saquon Barkley is as bad as DeAndre Swift is, and we'll get to him later. But the reason why I faded a lot of these running backs towards the top is because it's that kind of being efficient and being excellent across the entire season that sometimes is a little difficult. Saquon's looked faster than he did last year. He's looking more elusive and he's looking more impressive all round. But I'm still not sure whether I would be going out and aggressively trading for him because I think you're going to pay a very high price for him. But what is for sure is he's definitely shoved it down my throat so far this year.
Yeah, I think he's looked good. I think he's probably a top 3 to 5 back rest of the season. I'm hearing talk of him being the 101 if we redraft now. I'm not quite there yet. But start sits, is it fairly straightforward? Any interest in Jalen McMillan, who after an interesting start in terms of volume week 1, week 2, seems to have gone on the back burner slightly as the Bucs have rushed the ball a bit more?
No, I don't think so. I think it's one of those where that opening game for Jalen McMillan was excellent and definitely not doubting what he is as a prospect. He's somebody that myself and Tyler on our underdog streams, we drafted a lot of, and I think that he is potentially going to be really good down the stretch. But he was also kind of insurance policy against Chris Godwin. And then you see Chris Godwin go out there and see 17 or more fantasy points every week and look incredible. And then you've got McMillan, who started hot with 3 targets week 1, 2 targets week 2, 1 target week 3. I just don't think there's a big enough role where you could start him with any confidence. I mean, if you're in a really deep league, perhaps, but in a standard kind of start 2 wide receivers in a flex or even start 3 wide receivers in a flex, I wouldn't be looking to start him.
Yeah, no, I agree. If you've got any start sit questions, though, get them in the comments below. We'll answer every single question we get whilst we're live. We will work through them at the end of each matchup. The next game we're going to talk about, though, Jacksonville versus Houston Texans. Feels like this could be a complete blow-up game for the Texans. They've sort of not really fired on all cylinders as an offense. Do you think this could be the week that we see a huge performance from CJ Stroud and this entire offense?
Well, it kind of needs to be, or the panic alarm is going to be going off for people because CJ Stroud so far, he's been the QB7 and the QB13 and the QB25. This has been the book on CJ Stroud throughout his NFL career. I appreciate it's only young, but he only put up 2 of the top 100 fantasy performances in 2023. Because he doesn't rush, you don't get that. And the argument was going to be that they were going to spread the ball around so much with these elite wide receivers that it was going to be easy for them. And now we're seeing that kind of isn't the case. Tank Dell's been below 15% target share for the last 2 weeks. And this is the point where with Joe Mixon and Damian Pierce out, we should have been seeing the passing game thriving. Yes, they played Brian Flores' defense, which we know is looking pretty excellent. So I'm a little hesitant on it, but I do think that this is a great matchup. I think that you can really start Nico Collins and feel incredibly confident there. The Jags played the most man and press coverage in the league, and Nico absolutely feasts against both of them. Stephon Diggs, since week 1, we had all that talk about how low his air yards per target was, which was 1.5 in week 1. Since then, it's been 9.0 across 2 weeks, which is only 39th out of 52 wide receivers with 10 targets. It's not incredible, but it's further downfield and much more usable, particularly when he's getting like 12 targets a game like last week. On the Jags side, though, I mean, look, we both like Trevor Lawrence, but it's getting harder and harder to defend a guy who's 29th in completions over expected, 31st in off-target throw rate. And it all comes back to the thing which I spent a lot of time saying this offseason I thought it was fixed, which was the offensive line. And that's, at the minute, giving up pressure at the 6th highest rate. And we've just seen Trevor Lawrence he doesn't complete passes when he's pressured at a very high rate. He's definitely one of those quarterbacks who gets skittish when the pressure is coming for him. Last week, we saw Christian Kirk with his first game over 5 targets this year. He had 10. He ended up catching 8 of them for 79 and being a wide receiver 23, which is usable fantasy. it would be nice to see more of that. I think Christian Kirk, as much as we've called him like a roster clogger and he's possibly not the most perfect player, it seems to work for Trevor Lawrence when he knows he's got that outlet there.
Yeah, I disagree. I think Christian Kirk, for me, he's a screaming sell. I want no part of him. But I think if you can shift him off for anything really off the back of that good performance last week, I think I'd be doing so. I'm not convinced. I think this offense, as it goes forward, is going to flow through Brian Thomas. So yeah, he's the only player on this Jaguars offense that I'd really be interested in. Are you comfortable starting Thomas or Kirk, or is it just a case of only starting the Texans this week?
Well, I don't want to start Brian Thomas because I think he's going to end up seeing a healthy bit of Stingley on the outside, like the Texans' premier cornerback, who is quite happy to shadow at times. And then you've got Kirk, who will get the softer matchup across the middle, which is why I go back to him. I don't want any part of either Gabe Davis or Brian Thomas this week. In terms of the other players, I mean, Travis Etienne is a fringe starter for me. He's yet to finish higher than RB20. His receiving work's kind of okay. He's had 13 targets through 3 games, but he seems to be holding Tank Bigsby in check enough that you can call him a fringe starter for now and possibly not need to panic. I mean, this should be a game which is a bit easier for him. But otherwise, yeah, as we've got on screen, I don't really want to play many Jags at all.
Yeah, and we got a question in the chat. If you want your questions answered, get them in below. Should we be holding on to McMillions rest of the season?
I try to hold on to the rookies as long as possible on your bench, but you made a point in our Discord earlier that the bye weeks are coming quickly and it's going to get very difficult to hold guys. I think that's one where I will definitely be starting to consider dropping next week if he doesn't see more than 1 or 2 targets this week, because you are going to need that spot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as long as you can hold the rookies until you hit those bye weeks, I think that's important. Tyler's in the chat saying Brian Thomas is a stronger start if Gabe is limited or misses. Yeah, absolutely. I think, I'd also argue that Christian Kirk becomes a stronger start because hopefully that will mean Christian Kirk's on the field in 2 wide receiver sets. So makes him a little bit more interesting as well. Moving across, though, New Orleans versus Atlanta. Now, it feels like we've seen 2 very different offenses from the Saints so far. We've seen them playing phenomenally well when they've got up early, scored early, and played with the lead. And last week, a couple of O-line injuries, got behind early, and they looked like they couldn't string anything together. Which Saints offense are we going to get this week, Tom?
So I started in my DFS deep dive, the write that I do for our Discord members, which will be out probably tomorrow. Part of it will go up today. Derek Carr was one of the quarterbacks I shortlisted, and I always like to build out a big pool of players and then start refining it, going through the stats, going through the matchups, going through how things have gone and deciding whether I want to push that player this week or not, whether I can write a convincing enough write-up around them. And Derek Carr just couldn't really. Like, what he did over the first couple of weeks was brilliant. You know, his average depth of target was over 8 yards in both of them, fell to 6.7 last week. But it's more about this Falcons defense. I was quite down on them coming into the season, but Jesse Bates, I think, is one of the best safeties in the league. I really like how he plays. So I'm a little less high on Rashid Shaheed. I don't think that they're going to let him get behind them in the same way that he got behind defenses in the first couple of weeks. I don't think he'll necessarily put up a goose egg like last week when he had 5 targets, 0 catches. Olave's had over 85 yards in back-to-back games, so you can probably feel okay about starting him. But otherwise, yeah, it just feels like you're looking at Alvin Kamara to keep going and keep being incredibly efficient. You can see on the screen his 3.6 targets per game is a big drop-off from 6.7 in 2023. He missed practice yesterday, but returned to practice today. I'm not sure if he can sustain it for the whole season, but I don't mind playing him here. But the Falcons side of things, where things are interesting, you know, I'm heavily invested in the Falcons this year. Since week 1, when everyone was getting all jittery about Ray McLeod, his usage has dropped each week since those 7 targets. Darnell Mooney's averaging 6 targets per game, been over 65 yards in back-to-back games. I think Darnell Mooney has now entered the conversation where he can be an every week flex consideration depending on the matchup. But the player who I'm really excited about is Drake London, who runs all these horizontal breaking routes. According to Jacob Gibbs of CBS, that's one which the Saints really struggled to defend. I think if things broke just slightly different, we'd be talking about Drake London having a monster start to the season. He's broken more tackles this year than he did in the whole of 23 already. He's seeing red zone usage. He's got Kirk Cousins, who's had 20 completions in the last 2 games. Like, go back to last year and look at how many games the Falcons quarterbacks had 20 completions. There weren't that many. It was miserable. So, yeah, I'm feeling good about them. I'm feeling a little apprehensive about Kyle Pitts, though. He was Titan 4 in week 1, and then he's been the Titan 21, the Titan 13, no more than 3 catches in the game. Absolutely should have had a touchdown or at least a defensive penalty called against Chiefs last week, but it just doesn't feel like it's ever necessarily going to click on Pitts. I know you talked about Drake London in your buys and sells video this week. Are you there with me on this matchup?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, to me, the usage is there. I think every week we're seeing an improved Kirk Cousins. I think this offense is starting to come together. I think if you can go out, as I said in my video earlier in the week, if you can go out and buy Drake London, I think it's a fantastic time to do so. I think it's a great matchup. So, yeah, I'm 100% on board with you. Across the kind of other starts and sits, I think, sadly, the Saints tight ends, it's a shame. If it was one player, I think they'd be really usable. But because they're just cannibalizing each other, you can't touch them. But apart from that, this could be a really exciting matchup for fantasy.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's got lots of promise. I think it's one which I don't mind taking some DFS lineups and putting some sneaky tournament shots in on this one. I think Bijan Robinson now has this massive workhorse role. We've seen an 82% snap rate, 78% red zone snap rate. The Saints allowing 6.1 yards per carry to zone run concepts. They are dead last in that. 82% of Bijan's runs so far have been zone run concepts. So I think Bijan Robinson looks great as well. But otherwise, it feels fairly straightforward on what we want to start in this game.
Yeah, absolutely. Some questions in the chat. So we got Deft Angel, one of our members, saying, might we see Condre Miller? I know Alvin Kamara was injured but and missed practice yesterday, but Condre Miller, correct me if I'm wrong, Tom, he's still on IR, so we can't see him at least another week.
I think that's probably where Deft's getting at, talking, could we see him in the next few weeks? Look, I didn't expect this Saints team to be anywhere near this good. So maybe Dennis Allen can surprise us and actually mention Kendre Miller's name without scowling.
Yeah, well, one of my hot takes in the offseason was that the Saints were going to get the number 1 overall pick. So, I think maybe I was a little lower on the Saints than most. Another one of our members is asking, who'd you rather rest the season, Drake London or Pitts? He's just quite Bijan. This is Drake London by a mile for me.
Yeah, Drake London by a mile. What you're getting out of Pitts at the minute just doesn't, it feels quite replaceable.
Yeah, 100%. And then I guess that's Angel. Najee or Shaheed in the flex this week?
I'm going Najee. I think that matchup against Colts is quite favorable, and I like that. And I think Shaheed definitely can bounce back, but I'd go Najee there just on volume alone with Jaylen Warren banged up.
Yeah, I've got Najee sort of 20 spots ahead as well. And then another question, Wan'Dale Robinson, Cortland Sutton, Dobbs, Christian Watson, Michael Wilson, Tutu Atwell, all on waivers. Who do I pick up as I have a free slot?
Man, Christian Watson
Sutton for me.
Christian Watson, I just saw him be put on a trade block in one of my dynasty leagues for a second and a third. That value has dropped massively. Yeah, I think Wan'Dale Robinson or Cortland Sutton are the two I'd end up with. Wan'Dale Robinson's role's been quite steady. If you're in full PPR, Sutton is kind of the upside, but you need Bo Nix to start playing better dramatically quicker.
Yeah, we'll get to it later, but I was impressed with Bo Nix last week, I have to say. And then final question before we move on to the next matchup. Kamara hurt, so good luck for Taysom. I think it depends if Taysom Hill's fit. He's obviously got this chest injury, missed last week. Looking like he's going to play, but
yeah, that's it. It's just kind of hard to trust. I thought that Taysom was going to play last week, and then we didn't see anything from him. So if Taysom's playing, then yeah, I'll be fine with that.
Yeah, perfect. Right. Before we get to my matchup of the week, don't forget, get those questions in. Whether you're live, whether you're not, we will still answer every single one of your questions as we head up to Sunday. Start, sits, trade, whatever you want, get them in the comments below. Minnesota versus Green Bay. This is the matchup of the two of the top three play callers in the league, shall we say? I think what these two guys are doing so far this season is absolutely phenomenal. I'm so excited to see it on Sunday. Tom, are you there with me? This is going to be second screen watching for me all Sunday. Are you going to come join me?
I mean, yeah, but first, like, are we just going to bypass the fact that this is Aaron Jones' revenge game? They, they brought in Josh Jacobs to replace him, and Aaron Jones looks excellent so far. I was in on Ty Chandler. I thought that Ty Chandler would see a slightly bigger workload than he has done. Aaron Jones is consistently seeing around 60% of snaps. That seems to be the most that they want to push him at the minute. He's got the fourth highest yards per carry among running backs with like 20 plus touches at 5.43, fifth in explosive run rate, 100% of the inside with 5 touches. So, yeah, I'm definitely in on Daniel Jones. He's first in success rate versus zone run defense. Green Bay allow the 12th highest yards per carry in zone. So there's all this stuff that makes me think this is Aaron Jones week. Sam Darnold, who's been the QB4 in total points, has been excellent, very efficient. The passing yards and completion rate has dropped pretty much week on week, but the touchdowns are going up. But the concern there is, how much can Sam Darnold do it when playing from behind? Because this Vikings defense looks excellent. Brian Flores might be the last person you ever want around a rookie quarterback, but he definitely seems to be designing a defense that's giving quarterbacks nightmares. And that's possibly going to keep Sam Darnold's passing volume down slightly. Justin Jefferson looks excellent. But yeah, I'm just kind of slightly concerned. If the Packers could get out to a lead, what does it spell for Sam Darnold? Does he start seeing ghosts again? And the path for Green Bay to do that will mean that Jordan Love's probably back, and he's been practicing in pads this week. The Packers are dead last in pass rate over expected to start the season, but a big part of that has been the fact they've had Malik Willis out there, who I'm going to have to put it out there one more time. I apologize to Malik Willis. I did not, insert my whatever.
The whole world's football media needs to apologise to Malik Willis, because I certainly didn't hear anyone 2 weeks ago banging the table saying he was going to win both games. So, yeah. I don't think you're alone in that one, Tom.
Yeah, I definitely might have been quite cutting in my remarks. But as far as the Packers wide receivers, it's Jalen Reed, Romeo Doubs. They're the only wide receivers with over a 15% target share, the only ones who feel trustworthy. And then it feels like Dontavian Wicks and Christian Watson are sharing that next role. So I don't think I'd want to start either Wicks or Watson anytime soon. Emmanuel Wilson averaging 8.3 touches per game is your deep kind of flex option in favorable matchups, but possibly not in this one.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I talked about this in my weekly review write-up that I do for all our Discord members. It's basically a really clear cut in terms of this wide receiver room. Romeo Doubs is playing 100% of snaps. Jaden Reed is playing 100% of snaps in 3 wide receiver nets. And then the other wide receiver is literally a split between Watson and Wicks. And I think if one of them got injured, the other would potentially become a league winner. But when they're both platooning and splitting work, you can't start either. But I think for me, the most exciting thing about this matchup is Green Bay against this crazy Minnesota Brian Flores defense. I think it's going to be manufactured touches. I think it's going to be getting the ball out of Jordan Love's hands as quickly as possible. And when you're talking Green Bay Packers and manufactured touches, it's one guy, and it's Jaden Reed. And for me, he's a borderline top 12 wide receiver this week. I think his usage is going to be phenomenal. You've seen him be a consistent start with Malik Willis under center. We now get Jordan Love. He's not going to want to be hanging on to the ball. Bearing in mind he's coming off the injury, I think he's going to get the ball out quick, and I think we're going to see Jaden Reed with a huge amount of volume this week, and I think he's an absolute smash start. Do you agree with me?
Yeah, baby Debo. Let's go.
Absolutely. Anyone else? Are we comfortable starting Jordan Love in Superflex leagues straight off the injury?
I mean, that's such a league to league and roster to roster decision. I think the Packers, if they'd really needed to, they could have pushed him out last week by the sounds of it, but they were content to leave it another week. So see what the reports as we get closer to Sunday are. And of course, Tyler will be here on Sunday for your last minute lineup questions, but I'd lean towards yes.
Perfect. And we've got someone joining us. Yeah, absolutely. To answer your question, we do give trade advice. What do you think of Pittman and Ford for T. Higgins?
Yep, do it. I think I'm a little bit down on Jerome Ford for reasons we'll talk about when we get to the Browns game. Pittman, I mean, it's really not good. You can end up holding Pittman for weeks before you know when to start him. And T. Higgins was very close to having a very good game on Monday night.
Yeah, no, love it. I think it's a really good buy low opportunity on T. Higgins because I think he's going to go nuclear over the next few weeks. Recommend playing the Green Bay defense this week. I'll be honest, I'd try and get away from it if I can. I'm not sure there's going to be enough pass rush. I don't think there's going to be enough guaranteed points there. I think there's plenty of other matchups you could be targeting this week. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think Green Bay, when you look at them in terms of where they are in the Fantasy Pros expert consensus rankings, they're ranked at number 14 out of the top 32 defenses. So I think you can probably find somebody a little bit better on waivers right now.
No, perfect. And then a couple more questions. What do you think about Josh Jacobs for T. Higgins? I'm hurting at wide receiver and already have Barkley and Gibbs. Don't want to sell too low.
I mean, I'd try and push for a little bit more. I think you probably can because of the kind of volume that Josh Jacobs can get. But I'd be fine moving on from Josh Jacobs because Marshawn Lloyd's going to be eligible to come off IR in a couple of weeks. And yeah, I mean, I'm not the biggest Josh Jacobs fan all around.
Yeah, I think it's an okay trade, but I think you can get more for Josh Jacobs right now. So yeah, I agree. I'd be pushing more. Trade Braden Allen for Drake London. Yeah, I don't care if that's dynasty, redraft, whatever. That's an absolute smash
Twice
trade.
on Sundays.
Najee or Chuba Hubbard this week? Najee for me.
Yeah, so I've got Najee 2 spots ahead of Chuba Hubbard in my rankings this week.
Okay, perfect. And then last question before we move on to the next matchup. Would you rather use Wilson as a trade piece with Jacobs manner or try and acquire Jacobs? So I'm presuming that's Emmanuel Wilson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I think I'd be happy to do that and move away from his backfield because if, and Tyler mentioned it before that McFleur's saying he's satisfied and happy with where Emmanuel Wilson is in pass protection. Then what happens when Marshawn Lloyd comes back and all three are healthy? Then it could become quite a difficult backfield between the three of them. I'm always all right if a backfield's 2 players, but the moment it becomes 3, I really don't want any part of it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Moving on to another glamour matchup, let's be honest. Sean Payton coming to the Jets after he slagged off Nathaniel Hackett, something rotten. Do you think so? The Jets last week, Tom, this was a great stat nugget that I know you'll love. The Jets offense averaged 8.25 plays per drive, which is the best in Jets history. But the question is, do you think the Jets lack explosives and could they find them against what is an impressive Denver defense?
Yeah, I mean, they've got the league worst 17% explosive play rate, which kind of speaks to that point. And it's very much Aaron Rodgers' game is that he's just quite happy to plod up and down the field. It's methodical. It's sensible. He doesn't want to turn the ball over. He wants to make sure that he's completely comfortable before every pass. And then he goes to what works. This obviously isn't benefiting Garrett Wilson in the way we'd like. He is the wide receiver 28 in PPR points per game, currently behind Jacoby Myers, Brian Thomas Jr., Quentin Johnston, and others. And it becomes really difficult to be overly positive for Garrett Wilson when you look at he's going up against possibly the best shadow corner in the league in Patrick Surtain, who, whilst covering let's see. Yeah, Surtain, whilst he's covered DK Metcalf, George Pickens, and Mike Evans in the opening games, those 3 wide receivers were held to an average of 2.3 catches for 25 yards whilst he was shadowing them. So maybe it would be encouraging to see the Jets move Garrett Wilson into the slot more to try and get him away from Patrick Surtain. But we know that Alan Lazard is Rodgers' boy. He's going to see those red zone targets. He is the 5th most in the league at the minute. Breece Hall, 22nd in rush yards per game at 56.7, 15th in opportunity share among backs. It's really difficult to start too many Jets and feel fantastic about them for fantasy right now, despite the fact that we know this is the best Jets offense that we've probably seen in since like Ryan Fitzpatrick. It's
better than that. I've been a Jets fan since '98. This is the best Jets offense ever in that 26 years, no doubt.
I'm really sorry to hear that. But yeah, I mean, I think this one, I wouldn't be surprised if Aaron Rodgers comes out slinging it. Last year, he particularly did not like the Sean Payton, Nathaniel Hackett stuff. He said that that's all in the past now, but I don't believe him. Like, I mean, if we know there's one quarterback out there who holds grudges, it is absolutely Aaron Rodgers. But you can see the 38.5 over under, the second lowest over under of the week. I don't think the Broncos can really push them too much. Bo Nix is averaging 35.6 rush yards per game. 53% of his fantasy production is coming from that because he's just not really getting it done through the passing game. We thought that the running back room could be fantastic, but but no running back startable. Like today, I log on to Twitter and lots of people I respect are arguing about whether Tyler Bede or Javonte Williams or Jaleel McLaughlin are the guys who is going to come through here. But it's all just a mess. I mean, Javonte Williams is 30th in juke rate among running backs with 15 plus attempts. Jaleel McLaughlin is first, but it doesn't matter because the offensive line ranks 32nd in PFF run block grades. Cortland Sutton, he's had target shares of 28%, 32%, 12%, but he's yet to crack the top 30 wide receivers. Greg Dulcich, 8 targets last week, and he got 3 catches for 16 yards. There is nothing about the Broncos that I want to start. I don't want any part of a single player on that team. Maybe Bo Nix in Superflex, but that's it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think CJ Mosley's probably going to miss this game as well this week with the toe injury, which means the Jets might have the fastest linebacking crew in the NFL in Quincy Williams and Sherwood. And I think that could potentially even put a limit on Bo Nix's rushing ability. The interesting nugget of, obviously I'm a Jets fan. I read far too much Jets stuff, but normally when a player, the likes of Garrett Wilson, has had, a slower than normal start, you get that squeaky wheel game and you start to hear the kind of drumbeat of, oh, we're going to force him the ball. We're going to, he's a big part of this offense and stuff like that. Every single person to do with the Jets this week has been talking about, how good Garrett Wilson is, how much he's been drawing double coverage away. And therefore he's probably going to have to do it again this week. And we're not going to force him the ball. We're just going to keep rolling with it. And to me, that's alarm bells because I'm always looking for that squeaky wheel game, but I just don't think it's going to come at the moment.
No, and I think, there's a part of the Jets where it's like, they just need to be the real team and accept, that this is what it might take to win and it might take this to be ugly and all that. But yeah, I don't know. I think that if you're going to bench Garrett Wilson, it's not going to feel good. You're going to be feeling pretty miserable. And if he goes off, of course, you're going to feel awful. But Adam Levitan tweeted this yesterday. Garrett Wilson's next 5 matchups are against Patrick Surtain, week 5 against Brian Flores, week 6 against Buffalo, who are 4th best versus wide receiver per ETR's DVP metrics, week 7 against Joey Porter, who's turning into a really good shadow corner, and then week 8 against the Patriots and Christian Gonzalez, who we've talked about several times lately. So it doesn't feel great, and it'd be easier if Breece Hall was kind of the RB1 every week, but of course he's losing stuff to Braylon Allen.
Yeah, and I think on that, I think the Braylon Allen discourse and hype is getting out of control. I think part of it, you got to remember, the Jets played 3 games in 11 days. They didn't want to kill Breece Hall. I still think this is Breece Hall's backfield, and I wouldn't be shocked if we saw a 70 to 80% opportunity share for Breece Hall this week. I think people need to chill out a little bit on the Braylon Allen love. A few questions in the chat. Dak Prescott tonight or Jaden Daniels? It's Jaden Daniels for me.
Yeah, Jaden Daniels is my QB4 this week, so easily Jaden Daniels there.
Perfect. And then if you have time for one more, can you pick 2 wide receivers? Pickens, Waddle, Kirk, Judy, Wan'Dale Robinson.
I'd definitely be putting Pickens in there, and then I think, it gets pretty messy after that, but I'm probably still Jalen Waddle.
Yeah, I think it's Waddle for me. The only thing that would change it, as we discussed, is it's Waddle for me. No, it's always Waddle. And then last one, Rodgers or Burrows this week?
That's Burrow substantially by a long way for me.
Yeah, I think, yes, the Bengals lost. I'm sure we'll come on to that matchup in a minute. But I think people are overhyping. This offense looked good. The offense did its job. It's the defense that's the problem. In fact, we're not going to come on to it later. We're going to talk about it right now, Tom. Cincinnati Bengals are going to Carolina to play the Panthers. Look, we saw it Monday night. Are you as excited potentially about this Bengals offense putting up some serious points as we go down the stretch?
I'm excited about a world where it's possible that the Bengals are facing Andy Dalton as the first Carolina Panthers quarterback to score 3 first-half touchdowns since 2015 when Cam Newton did it. And if they lose this game, they will be 0-4, and there will be people calling for Zach Taylor's job. Twitter will become unbearable because everyone will say, when will the Bengals trade T. Higgins? And they won't, because they're trading Nemec. But it will be incredible as a Ravens fan. Now, of course, they're probably going to go out there and put up huge numbers. Like the Bengals, they're second in pass rate over expected. They looked excellent last week. They didn't punt, did they? They didn't punt or turn the ball over. It just got masked by the fact that the Commanders were the better team on the night. Like Joe Burrow was QB7 with 25.4 points. 8.5 yards per attempt, season high, also season highs in completion rate and completions over expected. We'll go figure because Jamar Chase is finally looking healthy. T. Higgins is back out there. So, of course, things are starting to look good. Obviously, everyone looks good against the Commanders' pass game, but the Panthers' defense, it ranks third in fantasy points allowed in the passing game, third in passing touchdowns allowed. Jamar Chase, 118 yards, also got in the end zone for the first and second time this year last week. Fully expecting Jamar Chase to keep rolling. T. Higgins was inches away from another big night. Yoshi looks like the wide receiver 3 by a long way in that offense. I think it's going to be a while before Jermaine Burton can really eat into anything going on there. And then Zach Moss is the clear running back 1, 75% snap rate, 70% running back rush share, 83% red zone snap rate. Yes, Chase Brown got in late, but this is Zach Moss's backfield, and it feels like the Bengals as an offense are becoming much easier for fantasy purposes right now. I don't want any part of the tight end room, despite the fact that a couple of weeks ago they were pushing stuff to the tight ends at quite a high rate. I think that was more to do with T. Higgins being out than anything. I do have Eric Allbags in Dynasty. Not to get into the kind of Twitter arguments that were going on yesterday, but I do have some Eric All. On the Panthers side, though, I already talked about it. Andy Dalton has brought hope to an offense and a team that badly needed it. And I think that Carolina can feel good about themselves going into this game. We saw the immediate impact he had for our guy, Deontay Johnson. Wide receiver 6 on the week, 26 PPR points, career high, 122 yards, which is mad. And then Chuba Hubbard, 60% success rate in the run game, running really well, running ahead of Sanders. Sanders is getting some of those high-value touches, but I think this sets up really well for Chuba Hubbard because the Bengals are so poor against the run right now. So, yeah, I think you can start plenty of players in this one. I don't think I'd start anyone on the Panthers outside of Deontay Johnson and Chuba Hubbard. Andy Dalton in Superflex leagues, in a bunch of dynasty leagues, I was paying sort of 60 to 70% of my waiver budget this week to get Andy Dalton, and I feel great about it. I feel like he's going to be starting for the rest of the season. I don't think there's any way back for Bryce Young.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think I've heard a lot of discourse over the last few weeks about what's wrong with, NFLs and why we're going to offenses and why we're going with the young quarterbacks. And look, 15 years ago, Andy Dalton would still be a starting quarterback. Like, he is absolutely in the top 32 quarterbacks in the NFL. The problem is that there's no real upside, no real future, which is why he's now a backup. But the one thing I want to say, Deontay Johnson, if this is your first time on the Deontay Johnson bandwagon, welcome, because it's happened again. He looked fantastic last week. He's now missed practice because of an injury. It sounds like it's only minor. They're taking a precautious turn. He should play on Sunday, but this is just the Deontay Johnson fun that we have. He'll always have an injury at some point. Start sits, anyone on the kind of periphery, anyone that you fancy taking a shot on?
I mean, Andy Dalton is possibly the exception there because this Bengals defense looks awful. I mean, it wasn't long ago that Lou Anarumo was everyone's favorite coach and everyone was talking him up as he should be getting head coaching gigs, but I think we've seen that he's quite fraudulent over the last couple of years. So maybe Andy Dalton for that revenge game narrative, but otherwise, I don't think I want to get into the Chase Brown or Miles Sanders streets this week.
No, makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. So some questions in the chat. So running backs are Hall, Kamara, Etienne, Ford. Wide receivers are London, Rice, Neighbors, Godwin. Tight end is Bowers and Goddard. Would you do Godwin, Etienne, and Goddard for Barkley and Reed?
I'm not sure I would, to be honest. I think I like having Goddard. I think that he's going to have a productive season. I did coming into this. Well, I mean, do have Bowers. I don't know where you at on that one.
I think it's the right sort of move you need to be making. I think your roster's loaded. I think you need to be consolidating some of that depth. Don't know how many you start, but I can't imagine that you're able to start all of them each week. I just don't know if I love that one. I'd rather keep Godwin. I like trading away Etienne and Goddard.
I think it's Barkley and someone else. If you get Barkley and someone else, as much as I love Jaden Reed, I think that there's going to be inconsistent weeks there, and you're giving up a lot of consistency in Godwin and a lot of week-to-week touches in Etienne, even though I'm not a big Etienne fan.
Yeah, my preference, I wonder if you can do Etienne and Goddard for Barkley. That would be a smash for me. I'd like that.
Yeah.
Right, next question. We have got, after listening to you guys, thinking of trading for Jacobs plus one of my bench receivers for Garrett Wilson. Yeah, love that. I think Garrett Wilson, if you can survive the next few weeks of Garrett Wilson, I think he's going to have a phenomenal end to the season and could be a league winner down the stretch.
Yeah, I edit the Fantasy Pros Weekly Trade podcast, which is a redraft one. And the one question this week, well, the two players who people are the most worried about are Garrett Wilson and Tyreek Hill, and they are screaming buy low opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And then last question before we move on. Adunze, Shakir, Cortland Sutton or Garrett Wilson, who to start as wide receiver 3?
I think it's probably Garrett Wilson. Much as I'm a little low on him, he is still my wide receiver 17.
Yeah, look, it's a tough matchup for Garrett Wilson, but I think you've got to start your stud there. I don't know if there's enough of a matchup or enough of a volume for any of those other 3 guys that you need to be considering benching someone of Garrett Wilson's talent. The Rams are at Chicago this week. Now, Caleb Williams has taken a lot of heat over the past few weeks about his performance. I'll be honest, I'm not concerned. I've seen enough of him. I think this is an offensive play caller, offensive line issue. I think Caleb Williams has been playing well. Do you agree, or are you starting to raise up the concern levels?
Yeah, I've just got a flag. I've completely left in a couple of placeholder texts there. We don't need to worry about Travis Kelce's injury lingering here, Tony Stonehands, or Kansas City's running back committee here. But yeah, in terms of the Bears, I mean, this is a rookie quarterback. Yes, he's got the most brilliant set of wide receivers around him that we've seen the number 1 pick have, but Keenan Allen's been injured. The offensive line is clearly an absolute mess, but this is a rookie quarterback. We do have to cut him a little bit of slack. I think that when it comes to Caleb Williams, you are going to have to take a little bit of the kind of rookie quarterback ride with this one. There will be weeks where it's painful, but he seems to be kind of slowly clicking. He seems to be really building on that relationship with Rome Odunze, who for me now is at the point where I would have more confidence in him than Keenan Allen. And I had probably close to 20% Keenan Allen in best ball this offseason. So it stings me to say that. The key though for this offense is they have to stop using DeAndre Swift. It absolutely starts there. You cannot put DeAndre Swift out there. And I know part of this comes back to the offensive line, but DeAndre Swift is 51st in rush yards over expected. He's 51st in EPA, 49th in yards after contact per attempt, 50 in success rate. And all those numbers are out of 51 qualifying running backs. That's how piss poor DeAndre Swift has been right now. He's got 2 rushes over 6 yards all season, averages 1.8 yards per carry. If DeAndre Swift can't move the ball, then of course it's putting pressure on Caleb Williams. If every time that he's getting to second down and it's 2nd and 9, 3rd and 12, 3rd and 13, because DeAndre Swift is not good enough to be a lead running back for a team in the way the Bears and Shane Waldron want to use Swift, then of course it's going to get like this. Shane Waldron said today he thinks Khalil Herbert is the goal line back, the short yardage back, and 4 of Khalil Herbert's rushes have come inside the 5, and 4 of his 6 rushes in total. He has to start using Khalil Herbert more. Khalil Herbert is an efficient running back. So, yeah, I think Khalil Herbert is the more likely one to be the lead back going forward, to answer the boys' question. The Bears, though, they're a run funnel defense right now. They're 6th in pass defense DVOA, 25th in run defense, which sets up perfectly for the Rams because they are so beat up at wide receiver and pass catcher. Kyron Williams, 89% of snaps, 26 touches, 116 all-purpose yards last week. Ronnie Rivers, 10% of snaps, and Corum, 0 involvement. Kyron Williams should be one of those kind of confidence plays this week that you roll out there and feel incredible about. We did see the Rams shift to more 12 personnel with all these injuries. They played 44% of their snaps in that last week, so maybe you can tell yourself Colby Parkinson is going to see more opportunities because he had an 89% route participation, but last week it only counted 3 catches and 21 yards. Demarcus Robinson's my slight lean at wide receiver. Tutu Atwell, kind of maybe flex viable. But in general, I want to start Kyron. I want to start Rome Odunze, DJ Moore, and I don't want to start anyone else in this game.
Yeah, I think this is a game you want to try and be avoiding as much as possible. But we'll dive into the questions. We've got a few more. Would you trade Drake London and Etienne for Jonathan Taylor? That's a no from me.
No, I think you're giving up too much there.
Yeah. With Mixon out, Singletary or Dobbins, PPR RB2? Singletary for me.
Yeah, I really like this matchup for Devin Singletary. Dobbins against the Steelers. No, Dobbins against the Chiefs. It just feels like game script could get away there.
Yeah. Should I take this trade? I get CMC for James Cook. I have plenty of running backs. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, if you got plenty of running backs, then you should be trying to get a wide receiver.
Like, I think I'm nervous about CMC. There's been some reports that it could be a lot longer. I think when anyone's flying over to Germany for PRP injections, doesn't hint that he's coming back anytime soon. So I love the idea of going to trade for CMC if you're a nailed-on contender, but I'm not sure 3 weeks into the season in redraft anyone can be a nailed-on contender. Another one of our members, Martin, he's asking, Scott Fishbowl, he needs to start to Caleb, Gino, or Anthony Richardson.
Gino's the lock there for me. And then that gets really difficult in terms of where I've got them in my weekly rankings. I mean, there's a lot of talk, a lot of people starting to look at Anthony Richardson wherever he belongs in the top 12. I have him as my QB 11 this week. I have Caleb Williams down at QB 17. So yeah, it'd be Anthony Richardson for me.
I think I'd lean Richardson, but that's very much a question mark there, I think. And then last one before we move on, start Wandale, Michael Wilson, Waddle, or Brian Thomas.
Where are you going with this one? I know you were higher than Brian Thomas than I am, but high enough to start. I mean, Jalen Waddle, looking at the ECR, I think he was Fantasy Pros expert consensus ranking. I'm sure Waddle was down at like wide receiver 39.
Yeah, so I've got Thomas one spot ahead of Waddle. I got Thomas 31. I got Waddle 32. So it's a slight lean to Thomas.
Yeah, Waddle is my wide receiver 31. So even though I'm not quite as high as him on him as you are, right there with you. So it'd probably be Waddle, and then I think I've got Wandale right around wide receiver 36. But that's not a fun one. I don't envy you making that decision.
And if you do want access to Tom and my rankings, whether that be best ball rankings in the offseason, whether that be dynasty rankings or weekly rankings, you can come along, join our Discord community, hit that little join button down below, and you will get access to that all season long and throughout the offseason. Pittsburgh versus Indianapolis up next. Talking of Anthony Richardson, do you have any confidence starting him this week in a normal 1QB 12-team league?
No, and how can you? I mean, it's absolutely miserable when you look at what Anthony Richardson's doing right now. He's got the second worst completions over expected. He's the worst quarterback in adjusted completion rate, lowest catchable throw rate, highest off-target throw rate. He is still 8th in fantasy points per dropback, but it's not been fantastic. Like, he finished as the QB4, and then he's finished as the QB 25 and QB 31. QB 25 and 31 finishes, those losses, those the kind of weeks where you look at your fantasy lineup and you're like, things hit. Why did I lose? And then you look back at the quarterback position and you put up like 8-9 points. Your opponent put up 20 points and you've ended up losing by 2 or 3 points. Like, yes, he is my QB 11 this week because it's so hard to bet against his upside, which we know is undeniable. But they're not rushing him in the same way. His designed runs are way down compared to last year. So I do really struggle with that. And then you look at the wide receivers. It's not like the wide receivers are making this easier for us because no Colts wide receiver finished inside the top 50 wide receivers last week. Michael Pittman's been the wide receiver 54, 58, and 62. I think he's droppable in redraft leagues. I know Tyler was saying that he feels like he can't start him right now. Jonathan Taylor is the only Colts player who I have really high levels of confidence in because he's 7th highest in yards per carry among running backs for 25 attempts. He leads the league in explosive run rate at 11.8%. but he still needs positive scripts. He's not going to get the positive. He's not going to get loads of work if they fall behind. Now, in this game against the Steelers, I don't think they're necessarily going to fall behind because the Steelers have the second most run-heavy offense on a per drop-back basis. They are playing a little bit slow. They play... Well, that's not fair. They're not playing as slow as we might expect them to. And there's a good chance that they could be dragged up in pace here because the Colts play fast and have a habit of dragging opponents along with them. But I don't think this is going to be a shootout like the Steelers. Calvin Austin's the only wide receiver on the Steelers with a touchdown. Pat Fryermuth's yet to get 40 receiving yards, not been inside the top 12 at any point. And Justin Fields is rushing less because of the way they're using him under center and playing more play action. So he only had 6 rushing yards last week. I do think that Justin Fields is playing good NFL quarterback right now, but I don't think that this is the fantasy kind of game that it could have been. Like a year ago, if I'd said to you Justin Fields versus Anthony Richardson, we would have been really excited for that. And I can't get excited for this matchup.
Yeah, I think the thing with Justin Fields is that he's been able to be a game manager through 3 weeks. And the Steelers have played such good defense and kind of complimentary football around him that he's not had to go and win a game. I don't know if the Colts are that team that are going to force Justin Fields to go and kind of make a play and win the game. But let's not anoint him as this kind of superstar quarterback yet again. The Steelers have only scored 3 touchdowns through 3 weeks. Like, this offense isn't amazing. And I'm kind of wondering if maybe we're getting a little bit caught before the horse when it comes to some of the hype that I'm seeing about Justin Fields at the moment. From a start-sits perspective, Tom, are you comfortable on anyone outside of kind of the core 4 of Pickens, Najee, Jonathan Taylor, Justin Fields?
If we got a report that Jalen Warren was comfortable and feeling healthy, then fine. But like when you go and get an MRI and then you're at practice in a red non-contact jersey, it's quite difficult. I mean, the Colts defense sucks. There's no way around that. George Pickens looks really good, but he's yet to get in the end zone and really turn it into a big day. So even he is kind of a flex play consideration for me. But yeah, I can't start a Colts wide receiver. I can't start Pat Fryermuth. Not that I've ever drafted Pat Fryermuth. And Anthony Richardson, if you've got a better option, you probably should start him. I've got him in my QB 11, but I feel very, very iffy about it.
Yeah, absolutely. We're going to dive into some questions. If you aren't watching live, you can still get your questions in the comments. We will answer 100% of them as we run up to the games on Sunday. So one of our members is asking, this is gross, but 12-team Superflex, Anthony Richardson or Snoop Huntley. I know we're low on Anthony Richardson, but that feels digging a little bit too deep.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Snoop Huntley's he's an okay player, and we'll talk about him when we get to Miami, but that's got to be Anthony Richardson.
Perfect. And then do you think Hurts is worth benching this week for Sam Darnold?
No, I don't. I mean, Jalen Hurts, obviously without AJ Brown and Devonta Smith is a different question, but I think against the Bucs defense that hasn't been as good as it could be, you know, they've given up plenty of fantasy points over the first few weeks. I think I'm still leaning towards Jalen Hurts there. The Bucs have allowed the 7th most fantasy points so far to quarterbacks.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think we're probably getting a little bit too cute there. I think roll with Jalen Hurts, even without those wide receivers, he's still going to get rushing potential to bring it home. And then last one, whilst we're on the quarterbacks, Sam Darnold or Anthony Richardson this week? It's still Anthony Richardson for me.
Yeah, so I've got Anthony Richardson, QB 11, Sam Darnold, QB 13. I think if you're 0-3 and you need a win, I would understand going with the safe floor from Sam Darnold. But otherwise, I mean, the way fantasy is played now, you just need that rushing floor.
Yeah, absolutely. We're 53 minutes into the video. If you've made it this far and you've not hit the subscribe button, help us out. Hit subscribe. We'll be here every week giving you these start sits and breakdowning every single matchup. We're going to move across to the late games now, Tom, kicking it off with the New England Patriots at the San Francisco 49ers. This feels like could well be a bit of a get-right game for the 49ers, who are struggling a little bit right now. Do you think they could come out and kind of lay the smack down on the Patriots?
It would be nice to see. I'm not sure that the Patriots are going to give it up quite that easily. That's what everyone expected. The the Bengals to do in week 1. And the Patriots, they just seem like they're gonna spoil some parties at times, then they're gonna be completely ugly and awful. So there's nothing reliable on the Patriots side of things. Like, I got to my notes in this game and I literally just have the words, everything is awful, nothing is reliable. And that's been summed up by Ramondre Stevenson, who we felt so good about last week. Just 0.3 points was it? I know a lot of people in our Discord follow the fact that we like Ramondre Stevenson a lot, and a lot of them were waking up to poor starts to their fantasy week. So hopefully Ramondre Stevenson can be a bit better. But I don't want to start Hunter Henry with his 12 targets in week 2 and then 3 in week 3, splitting snaps with Austin Hooper. I don't want to start a single wide receiver. Both teams, though, are in the top 10 in most fantasy points allowed to wide receivers. And the key this week is going to be the fact that New England play a lot of man coverage, which historically Brandon Ayuk has done very well against. Like the Niners, you can basically break down their games week to week on, do the defense play a lot of zone coverage? Okay, well, it's a Debo week. If it's man coverage, then it's an Ayuk week. And generally speaking, that's how it goes. Last week, it was one of those situations where it was a zone-based defense, and Juwan Jennings is really good against zones, so he absolutely fed. And I'm kicking myself so much all week for being out on Juwan Jennings. In one of my $350 fantasy pro leagues, I had Juwan Jennings on the bench and did not start him, and points matter a lot there. Ayuk, he's yet to eclipse 50 yards in a single game, ranks 39th among 46 wide receivers with over 15 targets in yards per route run at 1.2. So it's got to happen. Like, Ayuk needs to go out there and prove that he deserves the contract. But the main player you can probably have confidence in is Jordan Mason, who's had 20 plus touches in every game this year. So yeah, it's condensed. I wouldn't be starting Brock Purdy.
No, I tend to agree with you there. I think it's going to be a Jordan Mason game. I think Juwan Jennings, like, you can probably start him with confidence as like a wide receiver 3 this week. I think there's that potential absolutely in there. But most importantly with this matchup, do we think this is the last Jacoby Brissett game? Do we see Drake May after this one?
Yeah, this is absolutely the last game, because you know who they play next week? Miami. And Miami without Tua is a completely different prospect. You're talking about a defense that's struggling. You're talking about a team that can be completely out of sorts. That is the time to put Drake May in there. So let's get ready for Drake May takeoff, everyone.
Cannot wait. And moving from one rookie quarterback to the next, Jaden Daniels absolutely lit it up on Monday night. Feels like that's all people have wanted to talk about over the last 48 hours. They now head across country to Arizona to play the red-hot Arizona Cardinals. Do you think this could be an absolute blow-up matchup that we're targeting for all of our fantasy and DFS lineups this week?
It kind of has to be, and I haven't looked at ownership projections yet. I like to get my DFS write-up done, or at least pretty much entirely done before I look at anything. But I have to imagine that Kyler Murray and Jaden Daniels are going to be the short quarterbacks this week. I have to imagine that, particularly if Trey McBride misses out with, concussion for Trey McBride?
Yeah.
That Marvin Harrison is going to be mega chalk, coming off target shares of 38% and 32% in the last couple of weeks. And then on the wide receiver side for Washington, Terry McLaurin, he was finally let out of his prison on the left-hand side.
Finally allowed to run more than 10 yards downfield.
Moved to the right-hand side and then never touched the left-hand side for the whole game. But it didn't matter because it worked. And Jaden Daniels, this guy who we knew was an incredible deep ball thrower from what he did with Brian Thomas, Malik Neighbors at LSU, he was finally allowed to unleash it. And it kind of made people not realize that Brian Robinson only averaged 2.1 yards per carry in week 3 against a piss-poor Bengals run defense, which I, as a Brian Robinson truther, definitely took note of and was a little bit twitchy about that. Brian Robinson's night could have been better if Jaden Daniels had given him the ball at the 1-yard line rather than thrown to an offensive lineman, who that helps nobody when it comes to fantasy. But yeah, Jaden Daniels, 21 of 23, 254 yards, 2 touchdowns, 20.8% completions over expected. His only 2 incompletions with deep attempts. Jaden Daniels is a every week top 10 quarterback going forward. We had our concerns about him, and yes, he is still quite small. He is still quite skinny, but he never missed games at LSU when he took those big hits. And so far, he's doing okay in the NFL. I think he's a fantastic player to have on your roster. And let's not let's not worry about the floor on him right now, because so far everything's working out. In terms of the Commanders, so outside of Terry McLaurin, Brian Robinson, I'd really struggle to start anyone else. Like Noah Brown's had the second most wide receiver snaps. Nobody's really separating. Luke McCaffrey's done very little in the last couple of weeks. Zach Ertz, he's only going to be worth playing if he gets a touchdown because he's 39th among tight ends in yards after the catch per game played. He's too old. He's not giving you anything there. On the other side, Kyler Murray is my quarterback one on the week. I think he's massively undervalued, and we've talked about him for the last few weeks. Every week, I just basically go to start my DFS write-up. Kyler Murray's the first name on there because he's still incredibly cheap. He's an auto start. Marvin Harrison is fourth in air yards across wide receiver position. Like, paying up for the rookies was absolutely worth it this year. The Commanders so far, they've allowed top 12 performances to Jamar Chase, who was wide receiver 2, Malik Neighbors, who was wide receiver 3, Mike Evans, who was wide receiver 6, and Chris Godwin, wide receiver 8. If Marvin Harrison finishes anything lower than wide receiver 10, it will be a massive surprise to me. The Commanders were dead last in pass defense DVOA last year. They've allowed 67.6 fantasy points through passing, 11.6 more than any other team. It has to be Marvin Harrison week. Maybe Greg Dortch is a viable flex play, but yeah, I mean, talk me off this game, Rich.
No, I'm 100% there with you. I think, this is going to be a phenomenal game. It's going to be high scoring. I think it's consolidating in terms of the stars are going to get the majority of volume. I think, yes, there's some kind of secondary receiving options on Arizona that some people like, but look, Michael Wilson, Elijah Higgins, Greg Dortch, they're good NFL players. I just don't think they're going to see the target shares to be fantasy relevant at the moment. I think Marvin Harrison's going to have a massive week, and I'm all in, really. I talked about it in my write-up after the Monday night game. I was low on Jaden Daniels in the offseason. I was concerned on his build, his size, but more importantly, I was concerned about him operating from the pocket in structure. I saw more on Monday night than I thought I would ever see from him as a rookie. His ability to operate against a complex defense, identify, when he's hot, when he needs to get rid of the ball, and his ability to stay in and take a shot and still deliver the ball downfield. It's one of the best throws we've seen all year. But yeah, I love it, and I think I'm 100% with you. We're going to dive into some quick questions here, Tom. Purdy or Caleb this week?
Let me just check mine. Who have you got there?
I'm Purdy this week.
Yeah, I'm Purdy by about 3 spots over Caleb.
Yeah. And then Tolbert or Michael Wilson? It's Michael Wilson for me.
I do like Tolbert. I think he's kind of separated a bit from Brandon Cooks in the last couple of weeks, but I think I'd still lean towards Michael Wilson because of a high over-under in this one.
Yeah, and then last one, before we move on, Brian Robinson or Garrett Wilson? 0.5 PPR.
I think I lean towards Brian Robinson, but I'm sure you lean towards Garrett Wilson.
I need to have a look, but
let me.
So
I've got Brian Robinson quite high up in my flex rank. I got Brian Robinson as my 20th player in my flex rankings, and I have Garrett Wilson as my 39th player.
Yeah, shockingly, as James says, it's Brian Robinson for me as well. So yeah, no huge surprises here.
You win either way on that one, Rich.
Yeah, absolutely. I always win. Let's just be honest. Kansas City at the LA Chargers. Who'd have thought we'd see a Kansas City game with an over/under under 40? This offense just isn't firing at the moment. Yes, they're 3-0. Yes, Rashee Rice is a top 3 wide receiver for fantasy at the moment, but Patrick Mahomes with a sub-6 ADOT on the season, like
sub-5,
sub-5. Well, there we go. Do you think it's just going to be a continuation of that, or do you think we finally see Patrick Mahomes start pushing the ball downfield?
Denny Carter of Roto World has been making this point all off-season that people want the Chiefs to be more downfield passing, and the Hollywood Brown signing kind of hinted towards that. But they don't care. They don't want to. They literally played disgusting passing football last year, and they still won the Super Bowl. An average depth of target of 4.6 is miserable. But it doesn't really matter when you've got Rashee Rice, whose 5.2 air yards per target is the lowest of all the Chiefs wide receivers. And yet he's got 186 yards after the catch, which is 48 more than any other wide receiver in the league. So if you can dink and dunk, and you've got guys like Rashee Rice who can turn it into huge amounts of yardage, who can move the ball, that's fine. I think the Chiefs are perfectly content to go out there and do that. You look at the fact that the NFL saw fit to take Derwin James off the field for the Chiefs to make it a little easier on them this week. Where does he play? Middle of the field. Where's Rashee Rice play? Middle of the field. This is Rashee Rice week. Absolutely Rashee Rice week.
Every week, Rashee Rice week.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be tempting to start Travis Kelce because he's got 100 catches for like 1,223 yards and 9 touchdowns against the Chargers in 18 games. But if you have any faith in Travis Kelce right now, please tell me about it, because I am seriously concerned. In fact, this nice trophy sitting behind me, I won in a league where I have a Mahomes and Kelce stack, and I'm seriously concerned about how I can shift 2 of them as soon as possible, because there's going to be no freebie, and I'm going to have to haul that very heavy trophy all the way to London to give to somebody else, unless I can figure that out.
I think you're going to be handing it to me because I'm 3-0 in that league at the moment. So
well, can I interest you in Travis Kelce? But Mahomes, he's been QB 12, QB 18, and QB 16. I just don't think we're necessarily going to see anytime soon Patrick Mahomes return to consistently being a top 4 quarterback. And that sucks for everyone who paid that for him. But the writing's on the wall, because he doesn't rush enough. But unless he's putting up 300 yards per game, it's always going to be tough. The backfield, last week you got 18 touches for Carson Steele, 9 for P. Ryan, who were kind of fine flex plays. But now you've got Kareem Hunt. Like, I don't think Kareem Hunt is good anymore. Last year when he was with the Browns, he was 95th in evaded tackle rate, 67th in big run rate, and 52nd in targets per game among running backs. So I don't think he's good. But 3-headed backfields absolutely ruin fantasy value. So yeah, it's Rashee Rice, maybe Xavier Worthy as a flex play. On the Chargers side, this is a team who are second last in pass rate over expected. Justin Herbert has been averaging 10.1 fantasy points per game and 133 passing yards. We haven't really seen them pushed by a team last week. Last week, Herbert gets injured, and again, we don't see it. I don't think that he's going to be in a fit state to play this week. So it's still kind of difficult to tell what this Chargers passing game is supposed to look like. I know you can start J.K. Dobbins, though. 75% of the rushing attempts last week, which is up from like 40%, which was his previous high, 64% snaps. Outside of that, maybe Quentin Johnson as a deep flex play, because he's had 3 touchdowns through 3 games versus 2 touchdowns in the whole of his rookie year. Leads all Chargers wide receivers in route participation. I know a few sharp people are saying they think it could be Ladd McConkey breakout week, but I kind of want to see that before I have faith in it.
Yeah, and I think the one player you've not mentioned there that I'm really intrigued by, Xavier Worthy. Okay, he's not had the phenomenal fantasy production since week 1, but the usage is really encouraging, and it feels like he's going to be a bigger and bigger part of this offense as it moves forward. And look, the Chiefs aren't playing for week 4. They're playing for a Super Bowl. They're playing for that 3-peat. And I think Xavier Worthy is going to be integrated into this offense more and more. So if you can go out and buy low on him, I think it would be a good time to go and do so. Few questions we got in the chat. 16-team league. Are you starting Roschon over Zamir White this week?
Yeah, I'd start Anthony over Zamir White.
Yeah, I was going to say I'd start me over Zamir White right now with the way he's playing. Pick 2, Ramondre, Dobbins, or Akers. I'm sitting Akers there.
I don't mind Akers because of the matchup this week. Let me just check. Yeah, I've got Ramondre and Dobbins back to back, kind of like in the late teens, and then Akers is like the mid-20s for me. So I don't mind Akers. If you've got a strong lean there, go with it. But I think I'd probably still go Ramondre and Dobbins.
Yeah, of course. And then last one before we move on, Zach Moss or T. Higgins or Rashad White. I'm going Moss there.
Yeah, I think I lean Moss as well, because the Panthers defense, we know it's really, really bad, and I think they're worse against the run than they are against the pass, is my kind of gut there.
Yeah, perfect. Talking of really, really bad, Cleveland versus the Raiders. Should we keep this tight, Tom? Are you comfortable starting anyone in any of this matchup this week?
No, and I know you said keep it tight, but I've kind of got to just expand quickly on the one thing that I'm really down on at the minute, which is Jerome Ford, who is the passing down back. Looks like he's losing work, though, in more positive game scripts. So if you think the Browns can stay neutral or close to neutral with the Raiders, then it's noteworthy that Donta Foreman had 15 touches in the game against the Jags when things were much closer throughout. In terms of the passing game, you won last week when Amari Cooper went off on the first drive and then like the last drive of the game. I was definitely it definitely got me that one. On the other side, I mean, does Minshew make it the whole way through this game?
Nope.
I don't think there's any value there. Obviously, Brock Bowers, you are going to start him, but it's alarming that his route participation since week 1 has gone from 77% to 65% to 55%. Meanwhile, Trey Tucker's wide receiver route participation has increased from week 1 from 60% all the way up to 80% last week. So I don't know whether they just like feel like they don't want to push Brock Bowers too much too quickly. But maybe Trey Tucker ends up eating some of Jacoby Myers' work because Jacoby Myers was bailing on his blocking assignments last week, and Antonio Pierce was talking about players making business decisions. I don't want any part of Zamir White. Maybe Alexander Mattison if you think the Browns can blow the Raiders out, but I don't believe that's going to happen either.
No, I completely agree. Fairly straightforward in terms of the start sit. Basically try and avoid this matchup as much as you can. Quick question for you in the chat, Tom. Got offered Kyler and Bijan for Josh Allen and Neighbors.
No.
That's an easy no. Yeah.
And your team is really nice and there's lots to like there. And I think it can be easy sometimes to feel like, okay, I need to go out and shore up the running back position. But you were giving up the wide receiver 1 in fantasy and the QB 1 in fantasy for guys who still you're hoping they can hit that level. So no, I'd be looking to trade some of your other pieces. If you can move Etienne and Pollard or something, or package Etienne, one of those wide receivers like Khalil Shakir or something into another running back, then I think that's the right way to go about it.
No, love that. And then last question before we move on. T. Higgins or Amari Cooper this week?
I think I lean to T. Higgins, but I'm sure you probably lean to Amari Cooper.
Yeah, I'm Amari Cooper by 13 spots this week. Right, we're going to move on to Sunday Night Football, though. Buffalo versus Baltimore. Tom, is this a must-win game for the Ravens?
Well, last week's game against the Cowboys probably brought a little bit of credit, but you can't lose games at home on Sunday night in prime time if you want to be a Super Bowl contender. And the Ravens do want to be a Super Bowl contender, obviously. And the Ravens are kind of going all out. They're pulling out some of the little tweaks, the things that get the fans really up for it. They're wearing their all black uniforms, which last year when they played those in prime time, the atmosphere in A&T, like in Baltimore Stadium, was incredible. So I think they're really pushing to ratchet up things as much as they can. So it's going to be interesting because the one thing when I looked at this game, it was like, well, this is 2 defenses that are poor against the tight end position. But this is 2 teams whose offenses, I don't want to start any of the tight ends. And I know you're more bullish on Kincaid than I am. He's 25th among tight ends in snap share. Mark Andrews, though, honestly, I absolutely hate that I'm about to say these words. I've already put them in the Discord, and it pains me to say it, but the Bills, they allow 43% targets to the slot, which is very high rate. Andrews and Likely are the guys who cycle through the slot the most. Andrews in week 1 and 2 led the Ravens receivers in slot rate at 65% plus in both games. It's like it all stacks up that it could be an Andrews game if they wanted it to be. The Bills, they play more cover 3 than any other type of defense. Lamar averages the 5th most fantasy points versus cover 3. So the Ravens, they should be able to do things through the air if they want, but the Bills are excellent against perimeter wide receivers. So I don't think this is going to be a Rashad Bateman game, which may shock and hurt a lot of people because, you know, every week should be Rashad Bateman week. But the Ravens, they just seem to find different ways to get things done. I think Todd Monken is one of the best offensive coordinators in the league at finding weaknesses and being able to exploit it. The Bills, look, I mean, James Cook, all 5 of Buffalo's rush attempts from inside the 10 this year, which is a really positive growth for him. The Bills, they have a league-high explosive play rate of 39%. The Ravens, they've got the second highest explosive play rate at 37%. So this should be a game that can go back and forth. Neither defense feels like it's completely found its feet entirely yet. Khalil Shakir is the only wide receiver to finish inside the top 36 for the Bills. He's finished inside the top 36 in all 3 games. But he's only averaging 4.6 catches per game. He's been very efficient with things. Yeah, I mean, look, if there was one thing that I would say perhaps tempers for Josh Allen expectations, and I appreciate people who call me a homer here, according to fantasypoints.com, Josh Allen is 17th in fantasy points per drop back against cover 3, 14th in points against cover 4. Those are the 2 defenses, the 2 defensive looks that the Ravens use the most. So maybe they can clamp down on him. But yeah, I mean, look, we don't need to overcomplicate things here. This just should be a very fun game.
Yeah, absolutely. And as Steven says, over on the points, 45.5.
Yeah, let's go.
Let's hope for a big one. Let's hope for a big Sunday night game because we're all going to be watching. The Monday night slate, not quite so exciting.
No.
We've got Tennessee versus Miami. Let's start with the Titans. Will Levis, I said against the Jets, I thought he looked really impressive outside of 3 horrendous plays. Do you think there's enough in there that we could start to see this Titans offense moving forward?
No, I think Will Levis is he's dead man walking. Like, how many quarterbacks who piss off their coach to the level that Will Levis is doing survive? Like this, like Mason Rudolph is awful. Mason Rudolph is
worse than
not
awful.
Yeah, he is. And people get that kind of Stockholm syndrome stuff where it's like, oh yeah, maybe Mason Rudolph would be good because he did blah 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 with teams. Like, Mason Rudolph was fucking awful at times. Like, but Levis is currently second in turnover worthy throw rate. He's been sacked 15 times, which is second most among all quarterbacks. And teams just get really annoyed when quarterbacks are taking sacks, when they're turning the ball over, because it's difficult for them to implement their offense. And the coaches want to think that as long as they implement their offense, that things are going to be all right. So, yeah, I don't have any faith particularly in the Titans. We saw DeAndre Hopkins return last week, which pushed Ridley into more of those low, can't even think of a word now, much harder completion catches than he was getting when DeAndre Hopkins was playing less in the first couple of weeks. I think if this game is going to go Tennessee's way at all, it has to come from the running back position, because Miami allow the 3rd most fantasy points to the running back position. Likewise, Tennessee allow the 11th most running back fantasy points, which is good news for the Dolphins, given everything they've got going on with Tua. I think it would be great news for them if Tyler Huntley can go out there and start. When you look back at his starts in 2022, when Lamar was injured, he had 134 dropbacks that year. He had 67% completion rate, which was the equivalent to quarterback 17 through 3 games this year. His off-target throw rate of 16% would have been around middle of the pack this year. Deep throw rate of 11% would be the 12th highest. Targets his first read 65% of the time. That's like middle of the pack again. And I think Mike McDaniel can work with middle of the pack. Skylar Thompson is not middle of the pack. And I think they could do some creative things with him. Benching Tyreek Hill is something I wouldn't want to do. He's wide receiver 21 in consensus rankings, which I absolutely understand. But I mean, I couldn't bring myself to bench Tyreek Hill. Could you?
No, I think you kind of have to start your studs at this point. And as we said earlier, I've got Jalen Waddle in kind of the 30s. I've got Tyreek Hill in the late teens. I think you just have to hold your nose. Yeah, you don't feel great about it, but Tyreek Hill can score from anywhere on the field. Like, he can take one screen pass and it'd be a good fantasy day for him. Like, you don't want that going off on your bench. So yeah, I'd happily go and do that. Quick question in the chat. I think this is maybe a humble brag from Big Mac this week. Goddard or Prop Powers. They're my Titan 2 and Titan 3 this week. I'd lean Goddard, but it's incredibly close.
Yeah, I'd lean Goddard, and then if you can start Bowers in the flex, I'd do that.
Yeah, like that. Moving across to the second Monday night game, Seattle versus Detroit. Now, Tom, correct me if I'm wrong, but Geno Smith, he is playing, I'm going to go out and say, top 3 quarterback football right now. He has been absolutely phenomenal. And we're 3 games into him playing in this offense. could there be even more to come as he starts to integrate?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and you look at these games, they weren't pushed last week. They weren't particularly pushed against the Patriots. So, when we get into these games, this is the game, and I think we've got the over-under wrong on screen there. It should be 47.0 over-under. But these games with the over-underers where they start creeping up towards 50, this is where we can see the true potential of Geno, who's second in adjusted completion rate. The Seahawks are first in pass rate over expected, which isn't something we could have seen under Pete Carroll. They are fun. They're multiple. We've seen weeks where they're doing it through the ground game. We've seen weeks where they hammered JSN through the slot, and then we've seen weeks where they've spread it around more. Zach Charbonnet has been the RB8 and the RB7 the last 2 weeks with 19 touches in week 2, 21 last week, 2.7 yards per carry in week 2, and then 5.1 in week 3. So Zach Charbonnet has kind of proved that he can be okay, but I don't want to start him here because against the Lions, running backs have managed 50 carries for 2.7 yards per carry. They've allowed the 4th fewest rushing yards. The Lions, they're setting up as a pass funnel. They're excellent against the run, but they're poor when it comes to wide receivers in particular catching targets against them. They allow the most slot targets of any defense. We saw Cooper Kupp go out there and Chris Godwin. They were both top 8 wide receivers against the Lions. JSN, he was my start of the week last week. It did not work out against the Dolphins, but he's averaging an 86% slot rate this week, and I'd feel very confident about him. On the other side, though, I mean, Jared Goff, you were out ahead of this one, and he's finished no higher than QB 18 in fantasy so far. He's 26th in adjusted completion rate, behind Bo Nix, behind Deshaun Watson, and behind Jacoby Brissett. The Seahawks' big weakness is versus the tight end position, where they've allowed the 10th most fantasy points. But Sam Laporta sounds pretty iffy at best to be out there. Jahmyr Gibbs coming off a season low 37% opportunity share. I think both Gibbs and Montgomery are fine starters, but it is going to be that kind of experience with Jahmyr Gibbs. High ceiling, low floor. Yeah,
absolutely. And if Sam Laporta goes, any confidence in Brock Wright?
No. I mean, it's Brock Wright. I mean, he's going to, if he catches a touchdown, then great. But Brock Wright is outside of Isaiah Likely, is there a good backup tight end in the league?
Michael Mayer would be the only one I'd throw in that conversation.
Yeah, but I mean, that's still a huge amount of projection there.
Yeah, 100%. But yeah, a couple of questions. The boy, JSN, massive buy. I mean, I talked about it in my trades video in the week. Yes, go out and buy JSN. He's going to have a phenomenal second half of the season. I said about how impressed I've been with Geno Smith playing right now. This offense is going to go nuclear, and I think JSN, he's overtaken Tyler Lockett in terms of snap share, in terms of route participation. And I think the sky is the limit, absolutely.
To quote The Wire, the price of bricks going up.
And another question, do you start Cowboys defense start or hold off and go Minnesota? That's start the Cowboys for me.
Yeah, I'd start the Cowboys there.
Yeah, perfect. Right. The final matchup on the slate is, of course, the game that kicks off in a few hours as we're recording, Tom. Dallas versus the Giants. Now, Malik Neighbors has been phenomenal through 3 weeks. Does he continue it week 4?
Yeah, because the Cowboys have shown that they're not a good defense. Mike Zimmer, perhaps he's preoccupied with his incredibly hot girlfriend who's far too young for him. Mike Zimmer was supposed to come in and solidify the Cowboys in a way which we haven't seen him be over the last couple of years. They've been a bit soft at times. And that's not me having a go at Dan Quinn, who's a decent coach, but they have been a bit soft at times. And now we're seeing this Cowboys defense that is absolutely atrocious against the running back position, allowing a league high in running back fantasy points, like 5.4 yards per carry. So yeah, I think that Neighbors is going to eat. He leads the league in both targets and air yard share. The Cowboys, we talked about this last week, because they bring a lot of pressure from the defensive line. They've seen their opponent's first reads targeted at a league high 83%. Well, Malik Neighbors has a first read target rate of 47%. Everything is going to him. I think that Brian Daboll has been excellent at moving Neighbors around to get him towards away from the primary cornerbacks, to get him onto the cornerback 2, cornerback 3, onto guys with weaknesses. And it's worked out incredible for Neighbors, who is somebody we were both aggressive on in the offseason. I just wish I'd been more aggressive. Outside Neighbors, I think you can start Daniel Jones. Like week 1 was shaky. This guy coming off a season-ending injury. Like we have to cut these guys a little bit of slack, particularly when we don't play in the preseason. He's been QB6 and QB12 in the last 2 games. Devin Singletary's handled 80% of the RB touches on the year. And like I said, the Cowboys allow 5.4 yards per carry. So Daniel Jones, Malik Neighbors, Devin Singletary, I'd start all them with confidence. I would be okay starting Wan'Dale Robinson if I needed to. On the other side of the ball, as Hoosier says, Malik Neighbors is the greatest wide receiver of all time, in brackets recently. On the Dallas side, obviously you're starting CD Lamb. He has 52 receptions for 722 yards in 8 career games against the Giants. That's his biggest total against any individual opponent. The Giants, they rank 30th in explosive plays allowed. So you're talking about CeeDee Lamb, who we know is explosive. You're talking about Rico Dowdle, who's the most explosive Cowboys running back. I think it's clear that the Cowboys are starting to wake up and realize, okay, yeah, this guy Zeke, who we let go because he wasn't explosive and he was rather slow. He's still rather explosive and slow 18 months later. Jalen Tolbert's a fringe starter for me, 14 targets in the last 2 games. He's gone 124 yards and a touchdown. Brandon Cooks has had 8 targets and only got to 4 receptions and 35 yards. I think that's kind of, it's going to be very miserable for Brandon Cooks in managed leagues. So I try not to start him. But otherwise, I just think this is a really fun matchup. I think if you're playing DFS Showdown, I would be tempted to put Devin Singletary in the captain spot and see what you can do from there. But yeah, it's just going to be a good game.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we heard in the week CeeDee Lamb talking about how he needs to take on more and be a leader. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a massive blow-up week for him this week. Last question from Stephen. Daniel Jones, over 32 rushing yards, kind of feeling it. I've got him projected at 24 rushing yards, so I guess that means I'm probably taking the under. But I do think, the rushing is starting to tick up. It's starting to get there. Tom, are you taking the over there?
So let's see. So far he's had 15 yards, 32 yards, and 20 yards. Last week, though, he did have 8 attempts. And yeah, it feels like that's going to be very close. But yeah, I'd just lean to the over. I'd love to see what Daniel Jones splits are in primetime games, because it feels like every time there's a primetime game, Daniel Jones seems to get loose a bit more.
Absolutely. Who knows? He might have an 80-yard touchdown that he falls over at the 10-yard line again and doesn't quite make it into the touchdown. But that is it. That is it. The week slate is done. If you are here, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the join button. Come jump in the Discord. It is a hell of a time. Of course, Tyler will be back for a Battle Royale draft and preview. Tom will be breaking down the entire DFS slate over the weekend. Best of luck as we head into the week, and I hope you all win your matchups.